Hello, little. How you doing? It's only Monday, but how's your week going? How has your week been going? Are you doing okay? Did you have a nice weekend? Let me know how it was in the comments on the scale of potato to helicopter. Just whatever way you want to describe it. Just you let me know how your weekend went and how you are and how things are going. I've actually had a quick start to the Monday in that I finished a recording which I'm very excited about. It's just a one-off narration to help with advertising a particular book, and it has got so much potential. I am very, very excited to see where this goes. I'm not actually narrating the book. I just narrated the prequel. But it's a great concept. And I'm going to keep it under my hat for now. But I think this author's doing something great. And I don't know if you've heard my Audible copy of The Befallen. But in the breadth of writing, it has they are similar to a degree, but not. I think the main part is the paranormal, the thing that is on the outside but on the inside. It's fantastic, and I really, really have enjoyed reading it. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling about that, and I've asked you how you are, so that's important. That's always good. Ellie's being a bit strange. As you know, she had the doggy version of Vertigo a while back, and ever since then she's had a bit of a wonky head, and the vet says she's fine, everything's tickety-boo, but for some reason, literally within an hour of me being down and playing with her, giving her licky mats and, treats and outsides and making sure she's got everything, she starts to woo-woos. And I don't know why. And it's like she doesn't like sitting in this room. And of course, I don't want to encourage extensive attachment issues, because it's always been very balanced ever since I've had her. But I'm at a loss, and the vet's basically given her full clean bill of health, so I might have to take her back, actually. Anyway, sorry. As ever, if you could possibly hit the like button, that would be very helpful. And if you could hit the notifications bell if you don't have it, share, subscribe if you want to. Yes. And I always like hearing from you. If you don't want to leave a comment, you can always drop me an email. The email address is in the About Me section. And let me know how things are. I genuinely care about how things are. And I enjoy sharing the books with you. So this has been a lot longer than usual. It's becoming a habit having these waffle-ons. It's nearly 3 minutes. Best get on with the book, hadn't I? Chapter 10, Painted Dragon, by the amazing Mr. Tom Holt. Clever, muttered the dragon, with obvious distaste. The storage unit, or dungeon, in which his statue was kept, had obviously cost someone a lot of money. You reached it by walking down a long, dragon-sized tunnel, a bit like a torpedo tube, which led from an iron porthole in the side of a very tall cliff, something like a quarter of a mile through solid rock, to a big chamber. The chamber door was marble, 2 feet thick, mounted on chrome molybdenum steel hinges and opening inwards. Narrator's note, that sounds a bit swish. I digress. Who knows, Chubby said, indicating all that workmanship and expense with a dismissive wave. For all I know, you could smash and burn your way out through that eventually. But by the time you'd got halfway, we'd have flooded the chamber with gas and you'd be off to Bedfordshire up the little wooden hill. The dragon shrugged. Pity, he said. Yes, Chubby agreed. It is. It's like... He closed his eyes to help his concentration. Although your mum and dad don't mind you borrowing the car, it's irksome having to ask permission and say where you're going every time you fancy a spin. Please note, he added, the little metal box around your neck. I was going to ask. A bomb. Chubby sighed. I know, I feel awful, but what can I do? We're businessmen, not conservationists. Look, there's no nice way to say this. If you muck us about anywhere in the inner solar system, inside the dragon cosy or out of it, then a button gets pressed and goodbye dragons forever. Clear?
As crystal.
The dragon grunted.
No hard feelings? Get real.
Chubby's round face showed a smile with turned-down ends.
Fair enough, he said. If I was in your position, I'd sulk like hell. Actually, what I'd probably do is scrag me in the erroneous belief that I've got the button about my person. Just as well for you, you're not me, really. From both sides, as it were.
The dragon did some mental geometry.
Quite,
he said.
And on general principles, too. What about some lunch?
Over the Scottish salmon and aviation fuel, Chubby delicately raised the issue of time scale.
Not that we want to hurry you or anything.
Narrator's note, yes they do. I digress. He added quickly,
pleasure having you about the place and all that. It's just that time, if you'll excuse the context, is getting on. I can't earn a bent cent while all those goat-hoof buffoons are in this dimension. I know, because I've tried. God knows, and your old-school chum's starting to get on my wick. Every time I go in my office, his blasted screen winks at me.
The dragon laughed.
He used to do that when he was a kid, he replied. Just when you'd get up to answer the teacher's question, he'd wink at you and pull a face, make you forget what you were going to say. He only does it for wickedness. I'll bet,
Chubby replied morosely.
Look, I don't like to ask this, but who the fuck is he? I just know him as the genie of the PCW.
The dragon grinned and helped himself to a tumbler full of liquid propane.
Yes,
he said.
Oh, come on,
Chubby replied.
No, 3 guesses. Odd how guesses come in 3s. By the way, like wishes, and as far as I can judge from a very limited observation of your culture, petrol-driven public transport vehicles. All right, he's a djinn, close but no cigar. Evil spirit? Yes, but that's not a proper guess because so am I, and so,
he said, wrinkling his nose and emptying his glass into a flower pot.
Is this. Haven't you got any of that decent stuff we had the other night? You drank it all. Try some of this liquid nitrogen. An insouciant little concoction, but I think you might be frozen stiff by its presumption. Better, agreed the dragon. 2 more guesses. Okay, how about a god?
The dragon shook his head.
There is no god but God,
he replied.
Nice phrase, that. Read it on the back of a cornflakes packet. All right. A devil. Wrong 3rd time.
The dragon swilled the dregs of his glass around to make the vapour rise.
He is a dragon.
Chubby's eyebrows rose like the price of gold in an oil crisis.
Straight up? I thought you were the only one.
Far from it.
The dragon frowned.
Lord only knows what he's done with his body, but my old mate Nosha is, or was, a dragon, same as me. Little weedy chap he used to be. We called him Nosha the Newt. If he ever reached 15 feet nose to tail, I'd be surprised.
Chubby let that pass.
So what's he doing in my computer? He asked. Or didn't you get round to catching up on live stories?
No idea. I did ask him, but he didn't actually seem to answer. He was always good at that, too, especially when you were asking him to pay back a loan or something. Bright lad, Nosha, but you wouldn't trust him as far as you could sneeze him. Something tells me that hasn't changed terribly much.
We're drifting,
Chubby pointed out,
away from the subject under review, namely, when can you start?
Not bothered,
the dragon replied.
It's more a case of where rather than when, isn't it? It's all very well to talk blithely about carbonizing these goons, but I don't actually know where to find them. I'd have thought you, with all these resources and instruments and things.
Chubby looked embarrassed.
I was afraid you'd say that, he replied, through a mouthful of Stilton. And it's bloody curious, I don't mind admitting. Look, every time I've tried taking the crones out to do a spot of rustling, it's been a complete washout because of diabolical interference. Static so thick you could spread it on bread. But can I pinpoint the wretched critters? Can I, buggery? It's almost as if the negative vibes are being masked by something else. What? You mean like virtue?
Chubby shook his head.
Not virtue, chum. That'd counteract it and there'd be no interference. No, it's like a very strong signal on an adjacent wavelength that sort of blurs out the devils so you can't actually hear them.
He wanted to light a cigar, but thought better of it.
Which implies it's a very similar sort of signal, though different enough not to jam up my old biddies. It's a bugger. It really is.
The nitrogen cylinder fizzed again until the dragon's glass was replenished.
Not really,
he said.
That sounds to me like that bastard George. He's a saint, remember, so it's probably got vibes of his own, and he's an evil little sod, but officially good, which would account for similar, but not identical signals.
He scowled at the thought of George, and the glass shattered in his hand. He didn't notice.
Sounds to me like George and those demons of yours are still mobbed up together, presumably so that they can have another crack at me. I've got no idea, by the way, why a bunch of devils should wish me any harm. As far as I know, I've never done anything to offend their outfit. In fact, since I'm officially evil, they should be on my side.
Chubby, wisely, said nothing. A certain overtone crept into the dragon's voice when he spoke of George, the sort of nuance you'd observe in a conversation between authors about book reviewers. All to the good as far as Chubby was concerned.
Funny bloke, by all accounts,
the dragon went on.
Oddly enough, I knew a man who was at school with him. That training college for saints they used to have out Glastonbury way.
Chubby, who'd been doing his background reading, nodded.
You mean the old alma mater? Right, little Terroy he was by all accounts. Bottom of the class in everything. Failed all his inquisitions. Always in detention, doing lines. Never even turned up to heresy detection classes. Nearly got expelled for refusing to shoot arrows at Saint Sebastian. Fancy, Chubby said. Always up to that sort of thing. You know, untying Catherine from her wheel, stuffing the lions in the amphitheatre full of whiskers so they wouldn't eat the Christians. Must have been a right pain in the neck. Absolutely,
Chubby agreed, but he was secretly thinking, hey, what's so terrible about trying to stop people from getting shot, burnt and eaten? Well, different strokes and all that.
Be that as it may.
The dragon stood up, untucked his napkin from his collar, and finished the last of the nitrogen.
Soon as you get a fix on these jokers, let me know, and their firelighters. See you at dinner.
Chubby stayed where he was, waited for the extractor fans to clear the nitrogen fumes, and lit his cigar. So, the genie of the PCW was a dragon. Well, that explained absolutely nothing at all. As a clue, it made the Times crossword seem like an exploded diagram. But that surely was because he was being too thick to see the point. If there was a point. Probably all a coincidence. Absolutely. All a coincidence, like the remarkable coincidence whereby whenever someone falls off the top of the Sears Tower, they die shortly afterwards. You can get paranoid thinking too hard about coincidences. Mike looked at the address written on the back of his checkbook and then at the building in front of him. Well, yes, it was the sort of place, by the looks of it, where you had to abandon all hope before entering. But a resort of demons? Surely not. If demons lived here, then hell was a neat row of 1960s spec-built terraces with open-plan front gardens and a metro outside each one. Good point. Yes. Muttering all he could remember of the Hail Mary, which was, as it happens, Hail Mary, he pushed the front door open and went in. "Ah," he said. The woman at the ticket desk gave him an impatient, not you as well look, held up a slip of paper with a seat number on it, and said, £2, please. She was holding the piece of paper in what could only be described as a talon. You in the show? He asked. That's right, she replied. Costumes startle you, did it? Mike nodded. It's, very, realistic. How would you know? All right, I don't. Can I go in now, please? He found his seat, one of those bendy, bucket-shaped plastic chairs which you're convinced is going to break when you sit on it, though it never does, and took a long look at the stage. There was no curtain. The usual amateur dramatic set, all black painted hardboard, silver paper and things borrowed from people's homes, mundane, prosaic, everyday, like, in fact, the woman at the door had been, except that she was obviously another look round, this time at the audience. There were 15 or so people scattered about the hall, eating boiled sweets and reading the photocopied programme. Either they hadn't noticed they'd just been sold their tickets by, or else they didn't care. Possible, Mike told himself. Very tolerant people, Midlanders, but oh my God, those fangs. Improbable. He looked at the programme. Cast as follows. George, a saint, by himself. Chardonnay, a demon, by himself. Slit-grinned, a demon, himself. Prodsnap, a demon, himself. Holdall, a demon, also himself. Snorkfrod, a demon, herself. The dragon, members of the cast. Ah, well, Mike said to himself, leaning back as far as he dared and opening his box of Maltesers. I expect I've been to worse. Most of them, he remembered, at the Barbican. The lights went down. The chattering almost stopped. Playtime. Found them, Chubby yelled. The dragon looked up from the encyclopedia he'd been reading and grinned. Splendid. Where? Wherever the hell this is. Chubby handed him a greased playbill and a map. Ready to go? The dragon grinned. Anybody ever wondered, Mike asked himself a quarter of the way through the first half, why so much of medieval literature is anonymous? Answer, easy. I'd want to own up to having written this. At least there had not been Morris dancing. Narrators know I used to actually live in Hampshire, and my goodness gracious, you couldn't go anywhere in summer without Morris dancers. Seriously, village fair, Morris dancers, town square, Morris dancers, going shopping in the supermarket, Morris dancers getting a pint to refresh themselves before more Morris dancing in the foyer. So many Morris dancers with their sticks and jingly bells. And it wasn't even Christmas. Right then, I've lost my page. I'm so sorry about this. At least there hadn't been Morris dancing. Not yet. That, he admitted to himself, was like saying that nuclear bombs are safe because the world's still in one piece. That aside, it had set his mind at rest on one score. No question but that these people were in the everlasting torment business, the cream, in fact, of their profession. Solemnly, and with the utmost sincerity, Mike resolved that from now on he was going to be very, very, very good forever, ever, 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 and ever. So deep was he in silent repentance that he didn't notice that someone was now sitting in the seat next to him, until that person leaned across and whispered a request to look at his programme. Sure, Mike whispered back. He passed over the sheet. As he did so, he became aware of an oppressive heat and a smell like petrol. He glanced out of the corner of his eye. Perfectly ordinary bloke. All his imagination, except the bloke had yellow eyes, round golden eyeballs with a narrow black slit for a pupil, and no eyelids. Midlanders, see above, are tolerant folk, and Mike was from Brierley Hill, where they don't care who you are or what you do as long as you leave the buildings and still standing afterwards. Devil, no problem. After all, we're all God's creatures. But as soon as he'd recovered the use of his momentarily paralysed limbs, he was out of his seat, through the door, and running like a hare. Sensible chap. Because while he was still running, there was a horrific, horrible, dull bang, followed by a whooshing noise, broken glass music, and the very distinctive sound of fire. Instinct sent Mike sprawling on the ground, his head shielded by his elbows, as the first few bits of masonry and timber started to hit the ground all around him, and oh my Christ, the smell. Late changed to the cast as advertised. Whoever was playing the dragon tonight had just brought the house down. Badumtis. The dragon opened his eyes. There was, he observed, a large steel girder lying across his back. He shook himself like a wet dog, sending it spinning off into the rubble. He appeared to have made rather a mess. The dripping noise was still molten steel, wire reinforcements in the concrete. The groaning sound was material contracting as it cooked, rather than an indication that was still anything else, even temporarily alive, in the ruined building. No chance of that whatsoever. In the distance, the mechanical wailing noise the dragon had come to associate with impending public attention. Great. He spread his wings, flapped them, and rose in a cloud of dust and sparks. Job done, time to go home. 5 wing beats lifted him into the upper air, 5 more, and he was cruising through the sound barrier heading west. As he flew, he couldn't help reflecting that, in exacting his entirely justifiable revenge on George, he'd also killed 5 demons. Well, so what? The worst that can happen to anything mortal is that it dies and goes to hell. He'd saved them a bus fare and 15 or so innocent human beings who happened to be there. No, the hell with that. It was a matter of omelettes and eggs. They belonged to a different species altogether and were none of his concern. To feed those 15 and all others like them in this city alone, 1 million chickens a day ride to their deaths on a conveyor belt. And emotive reactions aside, there was nothing wrong with that either because of a hard but fair rule of nature called survival of the fittest. It was a rule he'd never really had a problem with, even when he'd been hiding in the rocks watching all the rest of his kind being exterminated by these people's great to the power of 20 grandfathers. Plenty more where those came from. And who's the endangered species round here anyway? As he flew, feeling the almost infinite power of his body, acknowledging the potential of his lazy but undoubtedly superior intellect, he sensed that maybe the jury was still out on that one. They brought the woman down from intensive care at about 3:30 that morning and put her in the bed next to Bianca. Superficial burns, light concussion, shock. She'd live. She'd been lucky, the ward sister explained. She'd only been passing outside the Sadley Grange Civic Centre when it blew up. Those poor souls inside never stood a chance. What caused it? Nobody knew as yet. They'd said on the news that the whole building suddenly burst into flames, not like an ordinary fire which starts somewhere and gets steadily hotter, more like a firebomb attack. Except who'd want to firebomb amateur dramatics? Nurse, Bianca said, I think I'm going to be... And she was right.
They're saying it was the Libyans,
Chubby reported, topping up the dragon's cup with lighter fluid.
God only knows why. I suppose they've got to blame somebody, or what are foreigners for? Don't go on about it, the dragon said.
The bread was stale. He breathed gently on it and had toast instead.
I don't see why not, Chubby replied. You did good. Neat job, in and out. Nobody saw you, or if they did, they've got too much common sense to stand in front of a microphone and say they've been seeing dragons. You can make a good living if you... Sorry, I'll shut up. Pass the marmalade. It's a good fellow. Were there any survivors?
Chubby laughed. "Sure," he said, "just not within a 200-yard radius. Actually, there's an interesting sideline to the story, because that whole area's up for redevelopment, except there was that tatty old hall bang in the middle of it, and absolutely no way of getting rid of it. Now, of course, bulldozers may safely grace. In fact, we could get seriously rich if ever you felt chubby," said the dragon quietly.
"I'd change the subject if I were you." "Suit yourself."
Chubby spread marmalade, drank coffee.
"Sorry to harp on," he said, "but what exactly is bothering you? I thought you hated humans." "Me?"
The dragon looked at him.
"Whatever gave you that idea? As of 9:27 p.m. yesterday, there's nobody and nothing left alive in this world that I hate, or even strongly dislike. Although,"
he added, with a slight twitch of his nostrils,
"this may change if a certain topic of conversation doesn't get shelved pretty damn quick."
"Sorry," Chubby replied meekly.
"It's just that since it was us who killed all your people and stole your
"Not you," the dragon said. Inside his skull he could hear the faint chip-chip of a headache hatching from the egg.
"When the last of the people who wiped out the dragons died, there were still wolves wandering around the forests of Islington. And besides,"
he added irritably,
"the thing with George and me had nothing to do with the dragon clearances. It was purely personal."
"Because of the big fight, huh? Because he won, simple as that?" The dragon shook his head.
"He was supposed to win. It was killing me that I didn't hold with, and now that's all over and done with, so let's drop it. All right?"
"Right." Chubby folded his newspaper, drained his coffee cup, and stood up. "So, as soon as you've done that little job—"
"Who says I'm going to do the little job?"
the dragon interrupted dangerously.
"Fuck you and your nasty bloody schemes. If you want to beat up on your own species, be my guest. It's none of my business, but I am off."
Chubby shook his head. He didn't say anything, but he patted the underside of his chin with the tips of his fingers. "The bomb."
"You bastard,"
the dragon said softly.
"I ought to torch you right now."
"Inadvisable," Chubby replied. "With all that inflammable liquor inside you, they'll be picking up bits of you in Tokyo. And like I said, what's it to you? Different species, right?" The dragon said nothing. Not that he needed words exactly. He'd have been sent home from a Gorgon's children's party for pulling faces. "Welcome to the baddies," Chubby said, and left. The fire brigade had gone home. The police were brewing up in their big blue and white porter cabin, and even the journalists had given up and gone to the pub. Under a pile of rubble, something stirred.
"Have they gone?"
"I think so." The pile of rubble avalanched, half bricks and chunks of concrete scudding down slope, stirring up dust, a head and shoulders poked out, eyes blinked in the starlight. "Ugh, about bloody time too. I've got a crick in my neck like a letteress. Keep your voice down, Slickgrid, and for pity's sake stop complaining." Gradually, and with much seismic activity, the demons emerged, all 5 of them. They were dusty and, after 12 hours under the rubble, stiff as all shop floor. Apart from that, no ill effects whatsoever. A 6th pile shifted and turned into George. He wasn't in quite the same immaculate condition. He had a black eye, and his hair was all singed off, but otherwise he was intact. He dusted himself off, just like Oliver Hardy used to do in the films, and climbed out of the mess.
"Now you see why we had to wear costumes,"
he said. Chardonnay nodded. "Good stuff," he acknowledged. "What did you call it?"
"Asbestos," George replied, and the lining's Kevlar, which is like old-fashioned steel armour, only lighter and a hell of a lot stronger. I use the same stuff for the scenery too, just as well, he admitted. If we hadn't all ducked behind the flats the moment he materialised, I don't reckon the cozzies would have been enough. Anyway, time we weren't here. Come on, you lot, the Padre will be worried sick about us.
Nobody had disturbed the rickety old Bedford van, and soon they were on their way. Chardonnay, sitting in the front with George, raised the obvious topic.
Well, George replied, he took the bait all right. You've got to admit that much. Maybe we should have spent a little more time thinking through how we were actually going to scrag the bugger, but we'll know better next time.
Next time? George nodded.
Of course, next time, he replied, faintly puzzled by the demon's tone. OK, so the first 2 attempts we bombed. I mean, we didn't do so good. Third time lucky, eh? Think of Robert Bruce, he added. And the spider.
No thanks, Chardonnay replied, shuddering. I'm scared of spiders, and now, he added, with as much unpleasant overtone as he could muster, I'm also scared of dragons.
Funny you should say that, George said, blithely overtaken on a blind corner, because spiders have always terrified the shit out of me, but eventually I found a way to cope.
Really? George nodded.
I squash them, he said. Helps put things in perspective when your mortal foe's looking like a raisin with hairs sticking in it. I think the same may hold true of dragons. Only one way to find out.
Chardonnay was about to say something, but wisely saved his breath. The way George was driving, he'd need it soon for horrified screaming.
Mind you,
George went on, he was definitely getting the hang of driving, because this time he remembered to brake with a full 1,000th of a second to spare.
It's going to be harder decoying the creep a second time, because he's going to assume we're dead, and we can't exactly publicise the fact we aren't because of the low-profile thing. Tricky one, that. What? Watch where you're going, you senile old fool. Sorry, you were saying.
Chardonnay opened his eyes. I think, he murmured, in this country they drive on the left.
That would explain a lot. Well spotted. To be honest with you, I think from now on it's going to be up to us to look for him, rather than the other way around, don't you? Of course, we could try this gig again, and the next time we'd be a bit better prepared. Maybe plant a bomb of our own in the auditorium, so as to be sure of getting him first. What do you reckon?
A look of horrified disgust pitched camp on Chardonnay's face. You couldn't do that, he gasped. The audience, innocent people.
George shrugged. Not people. Chaw, he said mildly. Potential customers, your lots and mine, one stone, very many birds,
It's hard to stand on your dignity when you're horrified, petrified, and covered from head to foot with brick dust. In Chardonnay's case, he'd never had all that much dignity to start with. If he'd ever wanted to stand on it, he'd have to master the knack of balancing on one foot. What little he had, however, he now used to good effect. George, he said, when you die, be sure to go to heaven. We can do without your sort where I come from. In order to sell newspapers, you have to get your priorities right, and an unexplained explosion with fatalities is clearly rather more important than a spate of thefts from art galleries. The lead stories in the next day's papers were, therefore, in order of headline size and column inches:
Royal Vet Sex Romp with Chauffeur,
Surfenders starring Love Triangle with Plumber,
Buzzer Decks Ref in Offside Rumpus,
Bomb Kill 16,
Statue stolen from Italian Museum.
The statues, 8 Bernini's, 3 Donatello's, 3 Cellini's, a Canova, and the Giambologna Mercury, all went missing from various locations in the space of about 8 hours. No sign of forced entry, no arrests, no clues, no visible connection either.
OK, guys,
Kurt banged on the floor with the butt of his rifle, but nobody took any notice. They were all talking at once, at the tops of their voices in Italian. With a weary gesture of resignation, Kurt sat down on a packing chest and waited. "Finished?" he demanded, 10 minutes later. "Good. Now listen up." 16 pairs of malevolent eyes fixed on him. "I don't need this," he reflected. "I've got a nice cosy grave I could be in right now." "Now then," he said, "I guess you're all wondering why." Marvellous language, Italian, for talking very fast in. They should insist all peace conferences should be in Italian. That way nobody would ever know what was going on long enough to start the war. "Shut up!" he cried, not a blind bit of notice. "Excuse me." He turned. "Well?" "Looks to me," David said, "like they upset about something." Kurt scowled. "What the fuck have they got to be upset about, for Christ's sakes? I've just sprung the suckers. They should be goddamn grateful." David made a small head gesture indicative of doubt. "Look at it this way," he said. "They're all male figures, all of Italian origin. Maybe standing about all day being admired is what they like doing best." The proposition had merit, Kurt admitted, but that wasn't his affair. He was only, as the expression goes, obeying orders. "Hey," he said. "Thank you," he went on. "All I can tell you is, my instructions said to get you out of those museums and art galleries and bring you here, which I've done. From now on, guys, you are on your—" He stopped, puzzled. Instead of jabbering at him, shaking fists and waving arms, they were standing about like a lot of shop window dummies. Maybe that was it. Knock off priceless works of art and punt them out at $12 a head to the leading New York department stores. Or maybe not. "Guys," long silence, then a statue put its hand up. "Excuse me," it said, and Kurt noticed in English. "Shoot," he said. "Excuse me," said the statue. Shit, it was a female voice now. "But can you tell us what's going on, please?" Kurt swallowed. Spooky no longer worried him. He felt comfortable around Spooky. Weird was as familiar to him as a pair of well-worn slippers, but this was strange. "Hey," he said. "I just did." Only the voice bleated on. "I told my husband to play be over by 10, and I'd be home in time to make him a late tea, and that was hours ago. And he gets all upset if his meals aren't where he expects them." Gradually, while Kurt was trying to get his larynx working again, the other 15 joined in, a symphony of bleats and whines forming a baroque fugue around the same main theme. Kurt had raised his hand for silence and obtained it instantly. 32 eyes were gazing at him. He could feel the blood rushing to his cheeks, and it was horrible. 32 ears hanging on his every word. Jesus, he told himself, now the suckers are all goddamn British. He turned, grabbed David by the arm and dragged him forward. "My assistant will explain," he said, and ran for it. Kurt, you big soft pudding, I don't know. I'd expect better of our Mr. Kurt Lundqvist, especially because the later books, which were absolutely fantastic. So, anyway, let me know how you're doing on whatever scale that you would like. I still think potato to helicopter is actually a really good scale to use, but you could use any scale you want. Be as creative as you like, because it always entertains me and I don't get out much, and I do enjoy these comments very, very much, and I love what we do. And hopefully, all being well, I'll record again on Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Depends how the next couple of days go, because I have got a couple of appointments this week. And Friday, I'm going to be out for the count because I'm getting my vaccinations done, because there is no way I am having the vid again this year, and I'm certainly not going to have flu. If you qualify, if you are in a position where your health requires you to, I would recommend getting vaccinated, because I am in that position, and trust me, I don't think I'd be here if I didn't. But then again, everybody's opinions are their own. Everybody should do their own thing, whatever works for them. And we all know we do what we do and respect each other's choices and la-di-da. I don't know why I'm going off on this flipping tangent. I think something might have just chirruped in my ear. Maybe it's something I saw this morning. You know, when you kind of like, you're doom scrolling over YouTube and you're kind of like looking at all this different stuff and you're like, oh. But it's okay. We're fine. So have a good couple of days. I will be back as soon as I possibly can. And as I said, I have got the dentist on Wednesday, but I will do my very best to record on Wednesday afternoon. And if it's just they're just going to have a bit of a rummage about, and then I'm going to go again next week. But yes, a busy couple of weeks for appointments. It's that time of year though, isn't it? Anyway, I'm going to start whiffling because I'm not even actually being entertaining. I'm just whiffling. So, lovely beans. And did you know they've got jalfrezi beans now? Jalfrezi beans, tikka beans, chili beans and barbecue beans. Now, I've got a bit of a thing about Heinz baked beans here in the UK because they are one of the best inventions on the planet. But the comment I made yesterday to my other was, in fact, if you aren't capable of making proper curried beans yourself, then you got no right to be going out and buying them, because it still doesn't taste right unless you do it yourself, and you kind of like, you know, you infuse the flavours into the baked beans. But there is now on earth that is a soul food as baked beans on toast or baked beans on a jacket tatty. Baked beans are awesome. Yeah. I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Do you like baked beans? In America, they don't have, they have Heinz baked beans, but for some reason, baked beans have to be called Heinz vegetarian baked beans. Here in the UK, they're just Heinz baked beans. But apparently, as I have learned, in America, you have sausages in your baked beans, which is rude and antisocial, because then I can't have baked beans. But then again, what you do? Enjoy your baked beans whatever way you have them. I myself am going to have roasted vegetables tonight, and that's going to be awesome. Nummy num num nums. Stay safe, take it easy, stay hydrated, keep warm, keep cool, just be happy. And I'll see you in a couple of days, me loves. Take care.